Hi guys, Ben here at Tank TV, welcome back, and today let's talk about aquarium vacs. So why would you use an aquarium vacuum? Obviously, when you're doing your water changes and with a siphon, you can vacuum the sand with the siphon itself. But the only issue with that is when you get to say your 50% water change level, you can't do any more vacuuming with the siphon itself. What these allow you to do is, while doing the water change, and even once you finish or in between your water changes, is you can vacuum the sand, the water pulls up through the back end, collects your waste, fish food, anything that's on the sand bed or in the stones in the baskets here, and kicks the water back into the tank. So what that means is you can spend as much time as you want vacuuming the sand to make sure you get everything out that you wanted to do in the first place. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the Eheim and the Fluval, which are the two leading and probably most popular that are in the market. We'll go through the sort of negatives and positives of each individual product and each vacuum. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about a couple of upgrades that I implement myself to make sure they're performing at their optimum and a lot better than how they do out the box. Let's take a look. So let's start with the Eheim. Positives and negatives as we work our way down the vacuum itself. So first positive is it comes battery powered. Now what that means, because it's not attached to a cable, you don't have to plug it in, you don't have a wire to worry about or work around, but also if you've got a large tank that's say 2.5 foot high that sits on a standard sort of 800mm high stand, the wire on the Fluval or the wire on the other vacuums may not be long enough to get to the bottom. So batteries on there, great positive to begin with. Second thing on here is the mesh that it comes with to capture what you're vacuuming and the waste off the bottom of the substrate or sand bed. Because this is a mesh and instead it's not the floss or the foam that comes on the Fluval, all you have to do is remove this, give it a rinse. Okay, removes everything that you've vacuumed up, stick it back on and you're good to go. You get an extension. Now one thing with both of these to improve it, and again I'll go through the upgrades and the improvements at the end, is remove these extensions on both of them. So the Fluval comes with one and so does the Eheim. The problem with the extensions is it just reduces the suction, and obviously no one likes reduced suction. Okay, so remove the extension off both the vacuums, because just get your hands wet, get your elbows wet, get your armpits wet. They're both fully submergible and waterproof, so remove the extension and get it in there. The last sort of negative on the Eheim, it's the only thing, and it's not going to be a negative for everyone. If you've got anything like shrimp, small baby cory like I've got, or any sort of small bottom feeders, the only problem with the Eheim is where the propeller is. I don't know if the camera's going to focus in, but it's not protected. Okay, there's a hole there where the water travels up, which then leads straight into the propeller. So that's the only downside of this one, but if you haven't got anything that you're not too worried about getting sucked up and obviously chopped up, this is the one for you. So on to the Fluval. Now, one of the positives with the Fluval, even though I said it was a positive with the Eheim being batteries and this being wired being a negative, with batteries it's always destined to run out and die as you're halfway through your maintenance and the deep clean on your tank. So if you're not too worried about working around a wire, obviously the Fluval has a constant power source as you plug it in. Only negative with that is the wire isn't very long, especially for big tanks. So if you've got a 2.5 foot tank on an 800 or 900mm standard, the wire isn't quite going to be long enough. But at the end of the video, I'll take you through the upgrades of how you can get around that. The middle here is, instead of the mesh like the Eheim has, this one comes with a cartridge and you have a floss in the middle. You can either get these pre-made by Eheim, I think they're about £10 for 3 of them, or again I'm going to talk about the upgrades at the end about how you can save a little bit of money and make them a little bit better. The only problem with the Eheim, while we're on this note, is If you take a look at the video, as the small particles and dust or the food that's decayed and broken down over time, it manages to make its way through the floss. So what that means is it works its way back out into the tank. So I always recommend the Fluval for stones, as you can see here, but then unfortunately, like I said, when you get right to the bottom, the stuff that's been breaking or that's been basically decaying over time, it manages to work its way back through the floss and kick back out into the tank. So on that note, one thing I would always recommend from a maintenance point of view is, especially if the tank's new, is keep on top of your vacuuming from the very start, at least once a week as a minimum. What that means is you haven't got anything that's getting down into the stones and over time breaking down and obviously turning into something so small that a vacuum can't keep hold of it. Now, the final positive with the Fluval over the Eheim is the end comes with a mesh over the propeller. So what that means is, again, if you've got anything like small fish, cory, sand sifters, shrimp, even if they get sucked up into there, they're not going to disappear into where the propeller is. Only negative side of that is if you've got anything like obviously dead plants, dead leaves floating around, empty snail shells, it does block up easily as you're doing your vacuum, so you do end up needing to take it off, clean it out, stick it back on again. Obviously with the Eheim, that isn't an issue. It shoots straight back up and it just catches into the mesh. Okay, so upgrades first of all on the Fluval, and everything I'm going to talk about here, the upgrades and also the vacuums themselves, I'm going to leave links for them in the description below. So as mentioned, the wire can be a little bit of an issue. One, it just gets in the way, especially if you've got a large tank with braces. But again, especially if you've got a large tank which is quite deep, and it just depending where your plug socket is, and you don't really want to have an extension lead above obviously the fish tank. So what you can do is it's only a simple female and male AC adapter, so you can buy an extension. Again, if you do a good enough search, but I'll put a link below that will give you a good sort of 4 or 5 meters of wire. So again, you don't really have to wire, so you don't have to worry about the length or the height of your tank, so it'll give you enough wire to work around. Upgrade number 2 is, like I said, the floss cartridges that Fluval pre-make for these. 2 issues. One, for about £10 you get 3 of them, which is extortionate. Second thing, like I said, again, the thickness and the PPI isn't high enough to keep the really small stuff inside the cartridge itself. So 2 things, or the main thing that you can do is, again, I'll put the link below, is I talk about filter floss all the time. Buy the same thing, and all you do is take that out, so where that floss there is inside, like I said, that's a pre-made cartridge in that one. So it just comes pre-cut, like that. All you'll do is you'll cut your filter floss to shape, and you will fold it and bend it inside and put it back together. Now, like I said, what that means is you can buy a thicker and more condensed filter floss, and so you can pack that in there so it will pick up a lot more than what the standard Fluval pre-cut ones will from the local fish shop. Again, like I said, I'll put the link below to both of them. The filter floss, you can get like 2 meters of filter floss for $14.99, or you can get 3 of them for about 10 quid. Makes sense, doesn't it? And again, the third upgrade, I've pretty much touched on it already. Both of them come with the extension. So remove the extension straight away, because all that does is reduce suction. Okay, like I said, get your hands wet, get your elbows wet, get in there and get right down to the bottom. The other thing you can do is, if you're not too worried, if you don't have to worry about anything on the bottom, or cories, snails, shrimp, anything like that, is on one of my other ones is I've cut this mesh away. So again, what it's done is it's improved suction a little bit better, but also it's not clogging up, and everything else is just everything else that your vacuum is shooting up and then being catched in the filter floss anyway. So that's the upgrades that I would do to the Fluval to make it a little bit better and make sure it operates at its optimum. Right, now the upgrades for the Eheim. First thing straight out the box is the batteries that it comes with, throw them straight in the bin. I just think they're a budget battery and they don't do the job as good as the upgraded batteries that I'm going to recommend. Now I put the Energizer lithium batteries in here, and it's the only batteries I now use. I've gone through all of them, all the other top brand ones, but it's the Energizer lithiums that one lasts longer, as they say in the advert, and increases suction quite dramatically. So the first thing, Energizer lithium batteries. Second thing, again, like I mentioned before, remove the extension off the end. And then the third thing is a little 3D print. Now this is a 3D printed tube, okay? Now the inside diameter is 20 mil. That one I've had printed to 40 mil long, or you can do it to 70 mil long. And what it does is it just goes on the end, just in there, okay? So it sits just where the propeller hole is. Like I said, that's 40 mil or 70 mil, takes it right to the end. So inside diameter is 20 mil and it goes over the hole nicely. And what that does is it just concentrates the suction to a smaller area. So it just means you can detail the tank and the substrate a lot better. So as mentioned, upgrade the batteries, good quality, high brand battery. Remove the extension off the end and get that little 3D printed nozzle to go on the end as well. That's the two of them pretty much in a nutshell. Like I said, you've got the Eheim, which is operating on batteries, Fluval, which is operating on a power cord. Fluval, you've got the floss or foam, pretty much whatever you want to call it, that is in the cartridge, but again, like I mentioned and like I showed you in the video, isn't best for catching or keeping hold of the stuff that's managed to make its way to the bottom of your stones. Obviously the Eheim runs with a mesh, or very, very high PPI mesh, so again, it doesn't leach out as much as what the Fluval does. And then again, you've got sort of negative and positive depending what you've got in your fish tank. You've got one with a mesh on the end, but again can block up quite easily if it's picking up a lot of stuff like plants, and that one's a bit more of an open end, which I think, to be fair, you could probably say the mesh on the end will reduce suction a little bit, and obviously on that one you've got an open end. So let's compare them in the tank and see how they get on. So a quick comparison of the two. We do the Fluval first, just going through the sand bed. Now there's two settings on the Fluval as well, and you've got a light as well. So again, if you're vacuuming in the evening or your lights are on, ramp down, obviously it lights up so you can see what you're doing. Then you've got a stronger suction and a weaker suction with the two settings. Now going through it, it's picking up majority of it, but it's just struggling to pick up the smaller bits. So it's kind of, that's it, it's kind of hit its limit. I'm going through it, and I don't really want to pick up too much sand, because otherwise you're just going to be forever topping up your sand. Okay. You're not really going to get it much better than that. So that side there's the Fluval. So if we now make a load of mess, do this as quickly as possible. We now do the Eheim. On this side. There we go. So we now just go through the Eheim. Now this has got the upgraded batteries, just not the nozzle on the end, because the batteries you'd obviously eventually get rid of anyway. Like I said, upgrade them. It seems to be, I've got to say, I think the Eheim is doing a much better job. But like I said to you in the video, I think the Fluval for me is more for sand substrate, for stones, because you can just push, because of the grill that's over the propeller with the Fluval, you can push it down into the stones and you don't have to worry. Obviously with the Eheim, the smaller stones will just fly up into the propeller and it just gets stuck wedges and you have to take it apart all the time. The Eheim is definitely the one for sand. And even the smaller bits, it just seems to be picking up a lot better. What I'll do is with the Eheim, I'll finish off the job the Fluval couldn't do. So that's pretty much it on the two aquarium vacuums, the Fluval and the Eheim. For me personally, I'm always using the Eheim. I just think that, again, with the upgrades, it just works that little bit better than the Fluval does, and not having that wire constantly hanging around, tangling up, just makes it that little bit better. If you guys have got any vacuums that you use, or again, any upgrades that may make this even better, leave it in the comments below. Everything I've used today, the upgrades, everything that obviously makes these a little bit better into the optimum, and the vacuums themselves, I will leave links to them in the description below. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.